Good morning. Welcome to the third annual Aspen Cyber Summit. I'm Garrett Graff. I'm the director of the Aspen Cyber and Technology program. Very excited to have you all join us here today at the beautiful California Academy of Sciences. Believe it or not, it's a beautiful day outside, and I hope over the course of the day you'll get the chance to take some advantage of the amazing space that we're in, grab a coffee outside and have some conversations with the people around you. It's going to be a wonderful day. And I'd like to first welcome Joyce, principal of PwC, to welcome everyone to the summit.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Joyce. I lead PwC's cybersecurity and privacy practice, and I'm also a member of the Aspen Cybersecurity group. You know, one of the things, I belong to several alliances and groups in the industry, but one of the things that I think is special about Aspen is that it really brings together a unique blend of people. It brings together general counsels, technologists, CISOs, CEOs, many different people from the media. We have authors in many types. And what I look at that is people that are capable of building bridges. And that's what I think is partly what we need here today. And one of the reasons when we were discussing the summit about where to host it, we could not think of a better place than the Valley and here in San Francisco, where really it's the heart of innovation and creativity of what we're all here talking about today. So I just want to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. And now I'd like to introduce the co-chair of the Aspen Cybersecurity Group, John Carlin. And for those of you who don't know, John just published his book, Dawn of the Cold War. So everyone, welcome John Carlin.
So thank you for joining us today. This is the third annual summit of the new Aspen Cybersecurity and Technology program, but it's the first time that we've held an event here in the Bay Area. And there's a reason for that. It's critical if we're going to address what is the top national security threat of our time and has been called as such repeatedly by the intelligence community, to build bridges, as Sean said, between those who work in government and those who are developing the technologies upon which we rely. And we hope today's summit is a step in that direction. I wanted to start by thanking Sean, Joyce, and PwC for their sponsorship of today's summit, and also for the work they do to build trust in society day in and day out. Sean really brings the experience that he had with his team as Deputy Director of the FBI, so from the government perspective, and now brings it over to the private sector, helping people struggle through, as we'll discuss more today, the maze of sometimes conflicting regulations, laws, and technical threats and actors. I'd also like to thank our sponsors who are in that same space, from Accenture, McAfee, Booz Allen, and Symantec. If you could join me in a round of applause. There have been some program changes today. The Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, will not be joining us. Apparently, there's something happening at the Justice Department this week, and his retired in Washington, D.C. But for those of you keeping track of the program changes with that and others, I encourage you to go to aspencybersummit.org. That's aspencybersummit.org, and we'll keep track of that and other changes. And also to check out, because we are a cyber organization, ##AspenCyber, #AspenCyber. Let me discuss a little bit the summit we have today. We're very excited to bring, for the first time, together out in the Bay Area, the key representatives from the so-called Five Eyes. These are the top intelligence officials monitoring cyber threats, and in some, and we'll hear a little bit about the differences, in some countries also protecting and remediating against those threats. So we have representatives from the United States, New Zealand, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia. I think there's a slight competition between who came the furthest for the summit, between the New Zealanders and Australia. Maybe they'll work that out later today. We also have with us speakers like the lead GDPR enforcer, who helped devise the regulations that so many companies appreciate having to learn, and so many lawyers have developed new practices trying to implement. So Andrea Jelinek, and she will be joined by the Attorney General for the state of California. For those of you who are following the space, California has just put in a new law that really is the strictest in the country when it comes to privacy requirements. So we'll be hearing from Xavier Becerra and from Andrea today about the different approaches that the EU have taken and the United States State AG. And that's joined by just an amazing round of other speakers as well that will be hitting on the most pressing topics of today when it comes to cybersecurity threats and what we can do to address them. Let me step back a little bit, though, and describe for you what's going on at the Aspen Institute Cybersecurity Program, why we started it. And it started as something, when I was in the Justice Department, heading the National Security Division, the threats were changing. We'd spent years and still were very much focused on a terrorism event that could happen at the scale of a September 11th and disrupting terrorists. But we also were seeing this new threat, whether it was terrorists taking advantage of social media and blending things like hacks into private companies where they'd steal personal information, provide it to a terrorist group, and then use that stolen information to create kill lists that were pushed back to the United States through Twitter. It's a real case, the Farizi case. Or something we war-gamed out for years, what it would look like if a rogue nuclear-armed nation decided to attack the United States through cyber means, and we all got it wrong, because we never thought it would be about a movie about a bunch of pot smokers. That was a surprise. I don't know how many of you have seen the interview. I know it's the only time in my career I've had to brief the President of the United States and go to the Situation Room and start by giving a plot summary of a movie to describe why we were there. Or the constant attacks and the new approach when it came to China and what we were seeing in terms of trade secret theft and economic espionage on a scale that the former director of the National Security Agency, Keith Alexander, who's a member of our Aspen group, called the largest transfer of wealth in human history. So as we were seeing these threats and wanted a place to discuss them, and Lisa Monaco at the time, who joined the program, was the Homeland Advisor to President Obama. When it came to other threats, there were standing bodies outside of government where we could have conversations so we could get the perspective of the private sector, get the perspective of technologists, get the perspective of academics. But when it came to the top threat, when it is extraordinarily challenging both technologically and in terms of the changes in the law, there was no such group. So the Aspen Cybersecurity Program was designed to address that gap through public programming like today as part of the program, but also the creation of a standing cybersecurity group. You're going to hear today from that group. There are 3 co-chairs, the CEO of IBM, Ginny Rometty, Lisa Monaco, President Obama's Homeland Advisor, and Congressman Will Hurd. A brief pause, because I think Congressman Will Hurd will be joining us today, but we need to give him a special applause. He's had an interesting night or two. For those of you tracking at home, he had an election where the results were so close that he came out and declared victory because they said he had won. They then said he had lost, and then absentee ballots came in, and he is now will be joining us as the still sitting congressman later today, but I would imagine a bit bleary-eyed. So those 3 co-chairs with their different backgrounds, Will, former CIA, Lisa, former chief of staff to the director of the FBI and Justice, and Ginny Rometty, lifetime of service in the private sector, gathered together a group that's just unique in this space. There is no other group like it, of 36 different individuals consisting of ex-directors of the National Security Agency, general counsels, CISOs, chief information security officers who are living the fight and on the front lines of it day to day, members of the media, academics, and others. That group has met, and today, for the first time, we will be announcing its recommendations. What they first did is they identified what are the 3 most pressing problems, talking with government officials and others that we're facing in this space. And the 3 problems they addressed, all of which will be discussed at the summit, were 1, we are not where we need to be when it comes to sharing between the public and private sector. We are not sharing information at the scope and speed and scale of the threats that we face in order to address them. And until we do, we are not safe. And this is at a time where there is no digital economy anymore. It's simply the economy. And that is why we're so dependent on this digital infrastructure. So point 1, to figure out how to get that sharing where it needs to be. Number 2, they identified is an enormous gap in our workforce. That people, private sector is looking at a gap of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of jobs that will be unmet unless we figure out a way to develop skills when it comes to the cybersecurity space. And number 3, we are where we are in terms of not being able to keep up with the threats of today and moving to a risk approach and trying to catch up. That's the present. But what the group spotted is we're on the verge of adding billions of new devices, so radically increasing the surface area of what is connected to the internet through the so-called Internet of Things. And we're not just having that massive expanse of vulnerabilities, an area that can be attacked. So it's not just volume, it's also the nature of what's being connected, where cyber incidents are increasingly going to put immediate risk of life and death. That's things like pacemakers that are being put into people's hearts and are internet connected, as has already occurred, to the drones in our skies, to the cars on our roads, and everything in between. So today you'll be hearing what the first recommendations are in each of those 3 areas. And what you'll see is that they're a combination of essentially setting the Constitution. What are the principles that our country needs to adopt to tackle those 3 areas, and also giving practical and actionable advice to companies. And those will be posted at aspencybersummit.org, and you'll be hearing from Lisa Monica and Will Hurd in more detail about those recommendations. There's a reason we picked today's date as well for the summit, which is we need to make sure for these newly elected officials, for the new Congress, for the new governors, for the state legislatures that are in place, cyber may be hard, it may be technical, our lives depend on it, our economy depends on it, it needs to be front on the agenda, and that's why we wanted to use today to make recommendations immediately so it's top of the agenda when they go back and are figuring out what priority areas should be for the next year. That is the way to turn ideas into action, and it's why this group is not a think tank, and this program is not a think tank. It is really a group dedicated to action and has practitioners. We also are announcing today and want to thank Craig Newmark and Craig Newmark Philanthropy for his $1.6 million gift, and to the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation for their support. Craig has been working, he's the founder of Craigslist, and I think his experience in that space and seeing the changing world has made him realize the importance of journalism, of combating disinformation, and of protecting voters from disinformation. And he's been working on a variety of programs. For us, the issue that they're helping us tackle are really 2, and we're announcing both of these initiatives today, which is the group in the program has also spotted that we have an issue of translation, right? I saw this in government. Remember when, after the OPM breach, their president tried 3 times to convene the cabinet. We'd had the largest theft of information in history from the Office of Personnel Management. The president wanted to get the cabinet together to discuss how are we going to approach this as risk management. The first 2 times, the different departments sent people, like for the Justice Department, they sent me and our Chief Information Officer. The 3rd time, Lisa Monaco and the Chief of Staff to the President, Dennis McDonough, sent out an email that said, you have to come as the cabinet officer. You can bring whoever you want, but if you as the cabinet officer don't understand this issue well enough to tackle it as risk management, we are failing. And they came to that 3rd meeting. But that problem of translation is not just in government, it's also in the private sector. So one program we're announcing today is the Aspen Tech Policy Hub to train and bring out fellows to the Bay Area. It's the first Aspen Institute initiative in the Bay Area, and it will be led by Dr. Betsy Cooper, who's here with us today. So stand up for a sec, Betsy. And the idea is to help bridge that divide, to bring people out with DC-based experience to the Bay Area as fellows so they know both the technology and the policy issues. And the second initiative along the same lines is journalism. There's been a lot of discussion about the role of media these days. We will focus only on news without calling it fake or real today. But a new program at Aspen Cyber is meant to address the fact that this is a hard area to cover. A lot of reporters don't understand the technology. They move to a beat where they're doing the technology, or they come from an area where they had a very tech-oriented audience, and then they switch to one where they need to describe these concepts to the popular, to most folks who are not thinking about this day to day. So this new program is going to train journalists on cybersecurity and technology issues, and it's also going to work to do investigative pieces. So we're announcing that tech policy program and journalism program today. And then returning back to the summit, it's opportunities like this and the interactions you're going to have here today that are going to drive our ability to fix this problem and to make us safe for the next generation. So thank you for your participation today. And with that, we're going to move into a very telling and timely topic. Just last week, the now former Attorney General Sessions announced a new China initiative. And in that announcement of the initiative, he said that there was an increase in the theft of intellectual property and economic espionage by China, that the Justice Department and other departments and agencies were going to work to combat that threat. And obviously that's a problem of international dimensions. Our first panel is going to be moderated by Ellen Nakashima of the Washington Post, and we'll discuss the China cyber threat. So please welcome Ellen and her panel.